Welcome, everyone. A great big welcome to all of people who are joining us this morning for the Bay Area League Day. How regional government decisions impact your local areas. My co-president, Roma Dawson, and I, Marianne Shovelin, thank you for participating in our 2025 League Day. Bit of housekeeping. We have a very full agenda and a very short break. Questions will be answered after the speakers are completed with their presentations. And please put your questions into the Q&A box. We will try to get questions answered by our speakers during the event, and the speaker contact information will be available. This event is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be available on our League Bay Area website a few days after the event. Our mission is to, as an interleague organization, or ILO, is to monitor, educate, and advocate league positions in a regional context. You see the regions on the screen right now. We observe regional planning and governance and review how decision-making impacts communities, addresses systemic inequities, and promotes transparency, financial accountability, and inclusive participation. You can see from the slide, we cover a large area. So we cover a lot of ground, water, and air. Our agenda today, on the next slide, starts with a keynoter by Senator Josh Becker. And then we have a panel on understanding the MTC-ABAG and its role in regional government. Have a short break, and we then look at, listen to a panel on how regional government decisions impact local jurisdictions. That's followed by a brief update on the restudy of regional government positions. And in between, we're going to be doing a listening session, listening to our participants, any questions they have, suggestions they might have, telling us what you think. Now, on the next slide, we introduce Senator Josh Becker. And is Senator Becker with us yet?
Yes, I am here.
Ah, wonderful. Welcome. Senator Becker is a public policy innovator working at the nexus of community activism, technology, and social justice. He represents California's 13th Senate District, covering most of San Mateo County and the northern part of Santa Clara County. We really appreciate your participation and your service, Senator Becker. As the author of several bills on accelerating California's transition to 100% clean energy and zero emissions, we appreciate the work that you're doing to keep us climate ready. And now I turn the floor over to you, Senator Becker.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a tremendous honor to be here with you on this call. We had a little problem with the link. That's why it says name of Anthony Yoshida, who's my district scheduler. But I'll just go ahead and speak. And
you're coming through fine.
Okay, great. Well, I'm honored to serve as your state senator, starting my second term, representing San Mateo counties and Santa Clara counties, and really vital that we're joining today during this critical moment for our state and our democracy. And I appreciate you standing up for our values and our democratic processes. Again, so much of what well, talk about today are really nonpartisan issues, right? When we talk about democracy, talk about a government, talk about the fundamental checks and balances that we all have believed in, and our country's been built on for the last 250 years. But we are really witnessing a fundamental reshaping of the federal government, one that challenges our fundamental rights, disrupts vital programs, and puts at risk the progress that we've fought so hard to achieve through the California dream. There's an ancient saying, it's this Chinese, told Chinese saying, and also curse, may you live in interesting times. Well, these are very interesting times indeed. And they require a much deeper level of thinking, one prominently focused on solutions, and a willingness to engage in, I'd say, an open-minded and open-hearted dialogues. You may have heard Elon Musk say in an interview that the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. I'm certain that the opposite is true. I believe that a lack of empathy is a dangerous state of mind. A lack of empathy is what will lead to, for example, a cut in our federal food programs. 14 million Americans are American children live in quote unquote food insecure homes, and food insecurity is a fancy way of saying that they don't have enough food, and that on some days they may be starving. And the notion that we're going to move against them and punishing children is unimaginable to me, right? Imagine if it was your child. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of empathy right now for these kinds of situations. And again, I just believe a lack of empathy is something that, that it's the difference between humans and robots. Our country's not a giant factory. And without empathy, we'd be, as lonely and desolate as one of the countries that Mr. Musk wants us to travel to, being Mars. But I believe this is just speaking about this, because I believe it's just a great threat to our civilization, and a great threat to our planet, and a great threat to our state. But because we've already seen how the firings and budget cuts are undermining democracy and have real consequences in California. For example, many of you know, we've discussed wildfires, wildfire prevention, what we can do on wildfires. I hosted a home hardening town hall recently. Well, 57% of all California forest land is owned, managed by the federal government. And the Trump administration just cut 3,400 people from the U.S. Forest Service, which is responsible for maintaining this land, responsible for hazardous fuel removal. This is something that will make California less safe, that increases wildfire risk clearly. And holding our hostage our billions that we need for on aid, which has never happened before, is clearly a massive threat to California, because this cleanup is going to be in the billions, the tens of billions of dollars, as happens with major disasters. So this is critical, because I believe that caring for our vulnerable populations and caring for people throughout the state, caring for children, is a fundamental part of the California dream and a fundamental part of California. And, we've done it with our own resources, but also with federal resources, have been key in areas that we've made a lot of progress, whether that be clean energy, whether that be covering our entire population for healthcare, really leading the nation in that world. And there's a threat of dismantling. I've also heard a lot of concerns. I hosted a town hall yesterday with our Supervisor Ray Mueller and Supervisor Margaret Abe-Koga, talking about how those cuts could affect not only state level but the county level as well. And ultimately, it's our responsibility to provide that safety net. When we hear, say, Social Security, they're going to lay off 10% of the workforce. There are almost 7,000 people. That means maybe closing field offices. How can we work with our federal congressional colleagues to make sure that people are getting the Social Security checks? I've already heard reports of those being delayed, and it's tremendously disturbing to me, as it's one of the fundamental programs that we have. Of course, when you talk about Medicare and Medicaid, massive programs, you're talking about $800 million in cuts they're looking to do, and the Congressional Budget Office has said that will affect Medicare and Medicaid. So from our roads to our bridges to our public safety to our grants, we're very dependent on cooperation with the federal government, and that is now threatened because they seem to have a target on our back because of our values here in California. But I just want to be clear that California is the bulwark. California will be the bulwark on issues from reproductive rights to civil rights to immigration to climate. I hosted a one-day symposium with Stanford Law School, my alma mater, just the other week on February 25th, where we had each panel a Stanford Law professor, one of my great colleagues, Diane Papin, Ash Kalra, for example, and then outside experts like Abdi Sultani, who runs the ACLU Northern California. And we talked about each of those issues. We had panels on each of those subjects. And what are the legal landscape? What are the issues? What is California? What can we do? And what are we doing to protect those rights, to protect our democracy? And the Attorney General came at lunch and reminded us we have $1 billion budget in our DOJ. It's the largest law operation, really, I believe, in the country. And they anticipated this. They filed lawsuits on day one, and they're actively working on this. But of course, this depends on our fundamental set of checks and balances. Depends on the administration listening to the courts. And we realize ultimately this has made us realize that democracy is really a set of beliefs and a set of norms, and we need to do everything that we can to make sure that these norms are upheld, that our fundamental system is upheld. And that's certainly what I intend to do, and what we talked about at the event yesterday. So California is fighting back, just as we lead on climate, healthcare, civil rights. We must also continue to lead on addressing issues here that we've been working on in our own state. I'm happy and proud to chair the Bay Area Caucus of 27 Bay Area legislators, and we're working on things like homelessness. We have to get people off the streets faster. We know that is the most inhumane, and also for the population, the most visible part of homelessness. And we know that people are dying on the streets, getting assaulted on the streets in higher and higher numbers. That's why I've supported work on interim housing with San Jose leading the way. Now San Francisco also has a plan to end unsheltered homelessness, to get to what people are saying is functional zero, which has already been the goal in San Mateo County, led by our great county executive, Mike Callaghy, working hard to achieve that. We now know that it's possible. Before there's not a lot of hope in this area. We now have seen that with the high quality interim housing that we can bring to build very quickly, build communities, provide lots of services, that we can stabilize people and get them back as part of our society and give them a safe place to live with their own lock and key. And so that's a huge priority of mine. My priorities generally have always been climate, social justice, and economic opportunity, and we're continuing to work on that. I'm really proud to chair the Energy Committee and have given the mantle of that at a really critical time to both increase our clean energy progress, which we need to do, and make sure that it's not stopped or even slowed by the Trump administration. But also we address electricity rates, cost of living issues we know are paramount in people's minds, and electricity rates are among them. And it's really the last 5 years we've seen massive increases in rates, mostly because of wildfire costs. We've given $20 billion to our utilities to work on wildfire prevention. And so we'll be tackling that this year, make sure all that wildfire work is done with the biggest bang for the buck, and that we try to find ways to take some of those costs out of rates, which is ultimately very regressive tax, and making those rates, more affordable. So it's a critical time to do that. The good news is coal is in retreat for the first time ever since 2023. There's more renewables on the grid nationally than coal. We've rid coal almost of our entire grid. And now we have so much zero marginal cost clean energy. We need to help spread that throughout the West with a Western grid. And that's one of the initiatives that we're working on this year. In terms of economic opportunity and social justice, I'll have a number of bills this year to move forward our state. But I've also focused a lot recently on technology and technology policy in a few critical ways. Number one, privacy, and very concerned at the federal level. They'll try to roll back our nation-leading privacy bills. But January next year, my Delete Act is supposed to take effect. Will be a one-stop shop to delete our information from all of our data brokers. There's 500 registered data brokers in California. We already required them to report if they have information about location status and whether, say, people have visited reproductive clinics, because we know that can be used against women. And I have another bill this year to require, do they collect information about other things, about union status, about immigration status. We know they have thousands of data points on all of us, and that transparency is critical and will help really further the goals of the Delete Act. Last year, I had 4 tech policy bills signed by the governor, a really nation and really world-leading AI Transparency Act that I passed, the California AI Transparency Act, that was 942. That was also, and those are really critical to restore trust and keep trust in our democratic institutions. And I'm grateful that the League of Women Voters has always been fundamental standing guard as guardian of our democracy, a beacon of civic engagement, and a tireless advocate for fair elections, informed voters, accountability, and governance, which are all things that we are striving for here in California to have make our ballot measures and who funds those measures more transparent. All of that work will continue. The Bay Area chapter has been instrumental, and I've always enjoyed my engagement on all of the issues, including climate and our natural resources. Last few years, I chaired the budget subcommittee on climate and resources and urban forests and greening, and all that tremendous work that we've been able to do on safe drinking water, for example, and now moving on to the Energy Committee, focusing on those core parts of our policies to keep us going. I want to say one other thing on healthcare, because one of my bills last year was also a nation-leading bill that got a lot of press, unfortunately, after the murder, the killing of a healthcare executive. But it renewed focus on this issue of denials of care. So I passed a bill to say that healthcare companies, insurance companies can't use AI to deny care because there's evidence of 300,000 denials of care done with an average of 1.2 seconds of review. That was done by one of our healthcare companies. And some of this came out in lawsuits about denials of care. But fundamentally, we still have a lot of work to do to improve our healthcare system. And that's why I have a bill this year on a prior authorization. Is something for years across the country people have been trying to figure out. We think we have the formula this year on that bill. So I guess my message to all of you here today, and I'm happy to go on, I'm happy to take questions, but I don't want to take too much time. My message is all of you here today is in California, we're working hard on the priorities that we know we need to deliver for our state, for our own residents, on cost of living, on quality of life, on public safety, on unsheltered homelessness, these priorities, while at the same time knowing that we are going to have to be that bulwark. We are going to have to be that leader in the country that keeps our democracy strong, that files lawsuits when necessary to protect rights, and really puts brakes on this just unprecedented attack, I'd say, on federal government, on government workers. Every day on LinkedIn, I see reports of somebody who spent their whole lives in fisheries or at NOAA or in scientific research that is told that their work is no longer valuable and no longer needed. And it's critical that we be that bulwark, that we be that voice, and that we stand up for the fundamental rights, fundamental liberties, fundamental premise, really, of a democracy, because we've never seen an assault quite like this. So it's a very serious time in our state and in our country. And we know we can't just react, but we also have to continue to lead in so many areas. When I talk about the California dream, I really think of three things. I think of both the economic progress, like the American dream. We had the State of the Valley event yesterday. We have 53% of our residents speak a language other than English at home, one of the most diverse regions in the country. And people come here to be able to have that economic progress. And we know that affordable housing and housing in general is a big priority. I'll have 3 or 4 bills on that this year as well. So people come for the economic progress, but they also come to California to be who they want to be. And that freedom and that protection of our LGBTQ community is absolutely critical to me and my family very personally. And then lastly, that innovation. And it's not just technology innovation, it's that spirit of policy innovation where we need to keep leading. And the scale that we can lead in California is huge. Just one bill that I passed on free prison phone calls to end the exploitative system where 1 in 3 families were going into debt to call their loved ones in a prison. That one bill led to an increase of 80 million minutes a month of prison phone calls, 80 million minutes a month once we ended exploitative and very burdensome, very difficult system, allow people to connect with their families. We know we'll get better outcomes going forward. So the scale of what we can do right here in California to help move the country forward is huge. We know that if tech companies have to do things in California, they're going to do them for the rest of the country. And that's true in many other areas. So we need to keep moving forward, but it's really institutions, because it's an attack on institutions, is institutions like the League of Women Voters that are going to be critical for us here. And I can say this as a former congressional staffer, as former press secretary on Capitol Hill, it's going to be critical across the country as well. So I really appreciate you having me here today, and just a real, again, honor to give this keynote at such a critical time in our country's and our state's history. Thank you.
Senator Becker, thank you. A quick question that's related to your comments, your recent comments. Does the state have to pay for keeping in place programs that must stopped and then have to sue the federal government to get repaid?
In some cases, yes. I mean, you know, the Attorney General said between 2016 and 2020, we spent, I think, $75 million additional, in addition to our DOJ budget on lawsuits, but recovered, I think he said, somewhere between 8 and 10 billion. I don't know, I can't remember the exact numbers for the state. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's 25 billion right now, just in climate. It's very specific programs that we were promised, that we went through a competitive process with on charging stations, on green hydrogen, on all kinds of things. $25 billion was being held up right now, including a massive loan to PG&E, which will actually help us. It's estimated $1 billion in rate savings from that. So we're having to sue already to try to reclaim that. So the answer is yes. We have a lot of money that's being unlawfully withheld, and we will have to file lawsuits to get some. And the good news, we've already started to see some of that on the clean energy front. There's a few things that came in even recently, but they're going to do everything they can to hold money back from California and punish California.
Thank you. Another question came in from our participants. Please share what you are doing to ensure free public education.
Yeah, well, I'd say at all levels. I mean, one, we've almost doubled K through 12 funding in the last 6 years, including the last 4 or 5 years I've been in the legislature, and we're going to need that. We're going to need every dollar of that, especially if they try to withhold funding at the federal level. We have $14 billion in the budget for our community colleges. That, of course, doesn't include our community colleges here in the Bay Area, and certainly my district, most of which are basic aid districts. So our San Mateo community colleges get $240 million in local property tax. They don't get money from the state. So that's a massive commitment. My son's in the CSU system. That's scheduled for cuts, and we're trying to roll back some of those cuts. And when he asked me why Cal Poly is getting $32 million in cuts, I have a hard time explaining that. So we have to make sure we fund our CSUs and our UC system, and even expand it. I was a founding trustee of UC Merced. Was on the board for 15 years. I chaired the foundation board, and it's been incredibly important. It's in the top 5 in the country for social mobility. There's more low-income kids in UC Berkeley than in all the Ivy Leagues combined. So our UCs and our CSUs and the CSU is the largest educational higher ed system in the country. So these are fundamental systems, fundamental sources of our social mobility and our economic engine, and we have to keep investing and protecting at all costs.
Thank you very much, Senator Becker. We really appreciate your speaking with us this morning, and thank you again. And
thank you. Sorry for the Zoom issues at the beginning, but very honored again to be here with all of you.
Okay, thank you. I understand that you have a hard stop right now, so I'm going to let you go.
Okay.
And I want to welcome my co-president, Roma Dawson, who will be introducing our panelists on the MTC-ABAG and its role in regional government. Roma?
Thank you, Marianne. It's International Women's Day and Women's History Month, and I can't think of a better way to commemorate both of those, the day and the month, by introducing The next three influential women, all three play a prominent role in regional planning for our 9-county Bay Area. Pleasant Hill Mayor Sue Noack was recently elected to a 2-year term as the chair of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and you hear it referred to as MTC. Chair Noack served for the past 2 years as the Contra Costa County City's representative on MTC and was a vice chair of its Regional Network Management Committee. Her education career has been focused on developing a strong finance background. Her career with several banking institutions, including time as a chief risk officer, that probably comes in handy in her role as chair. Chair Noack was elected to Pleasant Hill City Council in 2014, is now serving her 3rd term. She's a graduate of Bucknell with a degree in business administration and holds an MBA from the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania. Napa Supervisor Belia Ramos serves as president of the Association of Bay Area Governments and is a membership of MTC. You hear Association of Bay Area Governments referred to as ABAG. That may be a more familiar term for you. Prior to her election to the Napa County Board of Supervisors in 2016, she was a law professor, operated her own company, and served as a member of the American Canyon City Council. President Ramos has worked as a civil litigator, employment counselor, advising Fortune 500 companies on labor and employment policies. She graduated from St. Mary's and holds a law degree from UC Hastings School of Law. She has a long history of community service and in particular recognizes the important role of nonprofits in providing a livable, enriching community. And now for our 3rd introduction, Alix Bockelman is MTC and ABAG's Chief Deputy Executive Director. She's earned that long title, I'm sure, having been appointed to her new position in 2023. Some of you will recognize her from past League of Women Voters Bay Area programs. Her previous role was Deputy Executive Director of Policy, where she oversaw departments responsible for strategic planning, MTC's management of federal, state, and regional funds, state and federal advocacy, and also planning, including something that we talk a lot about at League Bay Area, and that is Plan Bay Area. You'll hear more about that later. It's the long-range plan for regional transportation and land use. I'm not going to take our time to mention all of her other roles. She joined MTC in 1998. Alix is a registered professional engineer in California and holds a degree in civil engineering and a master's in public policy, both from UC Berkeley. And now, without any more description, we're going to begin with Alix's presentation.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going to start with our chair and president. So can we maybe do that? Is that okay? I think if
we can absolutely do that. We can.
So I think we'll turn it over to Chair Noack, who you just introduced.
Thank you. Again, I'm Sue Noack. I'm the MTC chair, just recently elected, and the mayor of the city of Pleasant Hill in Contra Costa County. It's my pleasure to be here, and I'm really pleased to have with me my fellow colleague, ABAG President Belia Ramos, and also MTC colleague, and then MTC-ABAG Chief Deputy Executive Director Alix Bockelman. The MTC and ABAG boards have shared a unified staff for almost 8 years now, not just Alix, but 400 of her closest friends. During this 8-year time, the partnership between ABAG and MTC has grown closer, stronger, and deeper. The MTC Planning Committee now meets jointly with the ABAG Administration Committee, and we have a joint MTC-ABAG Legislative Committee, meaning ABAG's priorities are MTC's and vice versa. I'll come back to our legislative priorities in a little more detail shortly. The key point is the close partnership between ABAG and MTC really helps all of us tackle Bay Area's big issues more efficiently, and with the help of our Bay Area Legislative Caucus, which Senator Becker referred to, more effectively. No issue is more urgent than the chronic shortage of housing affordable for people who are not millionaires. So when the legislature established the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority a few years ago, it made governance a shared responsibility of MTC and the ABAG Executive Board. Since that time, BAFA has launched multiple pilot projects to promote housing production at all income levels, to preserve existing affordable housing, and to help protect low-income renters from the risk of displacement. BAFA has awarded about $28 million in pre-development money to advance the construction of more than 1,600 new apartments, closed loans to preserve complexes in gentrifying neighborhoods as long-term affordable housing, set up a first-of-its-kind online portal known as Doorway to streamline the housing search and application process, a big step forward for tenants, developers, and property managers alike, and awarded $5 million for rental assistance to prevent homelessness among at-risk seniors in Napa County. There's a lot more BAFA needs to do, of course, including getting a multi-billion dollar housing bond on the ballot. Political winds were blown the wrong way last year, but MTC and ABAG are ready to help BAFA move forward when the winds change direction. Speaking of political wins, among MTC and ABAG shared legislative priorities this year are extended housing and transit funding through the state cap and trade program past 2030, improving state and regional coordination to meet housing, transportation, emissions reduction, and environmental goals, updating and fine-tuning state laws around the regional housing needs allocation process, supporting and defending robust federal investment in transportation and housing, and defending existing federal clean air vehicle rules and standards. At the top of the list of this year's priorities in Sacramento is getting legislation passed that would allow Bay Area voters in 2026 to consider a tax measure to avert deep service cuts by BART, Muni, AC Transit, and Caltrain and other agencies, and also speed implementation of the Transit Transformation Action Plan to attract more riders and improve the experience for existing passengers. MTC commissioned a poll of Bay Area voters in January that showed such a measure would have a fighting chance. We asked voters about 3 possible tax frameworks. One is a half-cent sales tax for transit in the core Bay Area counties of Alameda, Contra Costa, San Francisco, and San Mateo. Another is a hybrid that would include a half-cent sales tax plus a 9 cents per square foot parcel tax in all 9 counties. And the third is a sales tax that would be a half-cent in Alameda, Contra Costa, and San Mateo counties, but rise to 7/8 of a cent in San Francisco to assist with Muni. I think the key takeaway is that while it's good to see voters' awareness of the challenges facing our transit agencies is quite high. And while most voters, or at least those in the East Bay, San Francisco, and the Peninsula, say they'd support a measure to support and improve transit, that support is well below the 2/3 threshold that would be required if MTC placed a measure on the ballot. This means any path forward in 2026 would need to be via a citizens initiative, which would require a broad coalition to gather the needed signatures and to organize and execute a campaign. Senator Scott Wiener of San Francisco, a former MTC member, and Jesse Aragon of Berkeley, who used to have Belia's job as ABAG president, early this year introduced a bill that would authorize placement of a transportation tax measure on the 2026 ballot. But it's still just a spot bill and does not include any details. So MTC last month adopted 6 principles to guide our pursuit of enabling legislation and for whatever measure would emerge once the Senate and Assembly have done their work. 1, it must be capable of passing. 2, it must prevent major service cuts by multi-county agencies. 3, it must take into account local transportation needs, including any local transportation sales tax measures that expire in the next 10 years. 4, it must fund rider-focused improvements. 5, it must be fair and seen as fair by all participating counties. And 6, it must include real accountability provisions with transparencies about how the money is spent and more oversight of the transit agency's financial information. Belia and I both voted in favor of these principles, as did all of our commission colleagues. I already have asked for a meeting with the senators to detail these priorities. The fact is that I want MTC to sponsor their bill because that will give us a seat at the table when the talk about amendments begin. Talking about amendments is my cue to stop talking now. Thank you again for your invitation to be here today and for your willingness to devote part of your Saturday to a discussion of regional government. Please allow me to turn things over to my colleague and regional partner, Belia Ramos.
Thank you so much, Chair Noack. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you, especially on International Women's Day. I think it is fitting and momentous that our two regional organizations are their elected leaders are both women. And so I am pleased to join my colleague Sue in this endeavor as we really raise the bar when it comes to regional governance. And Sue talked a lot about that intersection between ABAG and MTC. And words matter, actions matter, but what also matters is that willingness to put pen to paper. And that is exactly what ABAG and MTC have done in their partnership with Plan Bay Area, which is the best way to describe it. It's our regional aspirational document where we have inputs of our two different bodies, the MPO and the COG, ABAG being the Council of Governments, to really be able to put all our thoughts, our aspirations, and connecting the key elements of housing, transportation, economic development, environmental resiliency, and we are identifying strategies within the Bay Area to address the issues of affordability and connectivity, and to be able to dream and work towards a healthier and more vibrant and diverse Bay Area. And so that plan, the first iteration was in 2013, and that was Plan Bay Area 2040, because in 2013, 2040 seemed a really long time away from us. And so then we worked towards now Bay Area Plan 2050. We did that in 2021, and you may recall on this 5th anniversary this week, life changed drastically in the Bay Area in 2020. And so really taking stock, taking inventory of what the challenges are at present day, we decided to take a more focused approach and to dust off Plan Bay Area 2050 from 2021. I know it's only 4 years, but to really work at focusing that existing plan to today's challenges, because we know that life has changed. The mobility has changed, housing has changed. Our polling tells us this, and our lives and what we feel out in the Bay Area, and all of our 9 Bay Area counties tell us this. So there's a few challenges that we have. The challenges continue to grow, but we're going to continue to be aspirational in this document that we are working on together. And one of them is we have less money, and that's an ever-growing need for us when it comes to infrastructure investments, and particularly when it comes to transportation investments. We are forecasting about $80 billion less on that over the next 25 years. When we look at kind of where our monies are coming in, our state and federal, just put a pin in that because I know that is an ever-changing topic for us. But for the most part, those funding streams have held steady. But we do anticipate a scaling back of estimates when it comes to bridge tolls and other regional sources and transit fares. So overall, we know that there is going to be greater pressures on those transportation funding mechanisms for these projects that are identified. We've already made some tough decisions as to what is going to be funded and what is not. And we know that some of these projects are simply going to have to drop off that aspirational list so that we can really hone in our focus as a region. On the housing side, we have made some great strides in the Bay Area and investments in housing. But as you know, looking around, looking at your neighbors, looking at affordability of housing, and looking at the state of the unhoused in the Bay Area, this is an ever pressing need for us to address. And so when you look at what Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus is doing, we are really looking at bringing that intersection of climate and equity and affordability all together into areas that we call transit rich, that are in those growth geography areas. That's the language coined within Plan Bay Area 2050 plus, to bring people to places where they have access to services, to bring them to bring housing to places that have walkability and livability in a greater way, as opposed to those far reach areas that may not have that connectivity and truly do impact a quality of life for our residents in the Bay Area. And so when we look at it, we've already made some great strides towards protecting housing and displacement, and addressing some of our displacement pressures. But cost continues, and affordability continues to be something that we're going to need to address in 2020 Bay Area Plan 2050 plus is addressing that. Overall, when you look at this plan, it's a 7-time increase of affordable units with nearly 1 million permanently affordable homes by 2050. That's aspirational, that's ambitious, and we know it's a heavy lift, and we know it's going to be a heavy lift without dedicated funding streams towards that end. But it's also important for us to be able to put this down on paper to say, this is where we need to go as a region to be able to address those pressing needs. Now, in that, we've got our state partners. We're going to have the California Air Resources Board, affectionately known as CARB. Not the carbs that affect your metabolism, the other carb that affects our daily life and livability here in California. And we know that they're going to take a very close look at our plans to make sure that we are meeting the clean air strategies and that we're making progress overall in the Bay Area. Again, super aspirational, but we have coalesced within our two organizations, MTC and ABAG, and we approved the final blueprint in January. So the next steps over the next few months, we're going to complete the draft of Plan Bay Area 2050 plus, and a draft implementation plan, and a draft EIR. So you'll be seeing some public engagement opportunities about Plan Bay Area 2050 plus during the summer, and we really hope that you'll participate. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that intersection of work that ABAG does at the local level and working towards climate and really resiliency. That's what regional governance is about, of how we make ourselves better for the future. And truly that does require us to integrate climate pressures and resiliency in that. So to share with you a couple of opportunities, the Friends of the San Francisco Estuary is a nonprofit within the ABAG umbrella that is really looking at lifting up and improving the health of our San Francisco Bay Estuary and the surrounding wetlands and watersheds, and they are looking for new board members. So if you're a person that's passionate about the health of our bay and you are looking for opportunities to contribute, this might just be it for you, and you can learn more at friendsofsfestuary.org. Looking ahead, the conference for the Estuary Partnership is on October 28th and 29th, and that's going to take place at the Henry J. Kaiser Center in Oakland. And so you'll be able to see the work that's being done to protect the water quality in the bay and its connected delta, and to create a more sustainable and improved habitat in and around the estuary with the climate pressures that we are facing now. So a big one is sea level rise. We know this in so many places, but really here in the Bay Area. And to bring it home, the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, known as BCDC, on which I serve as a commissioner as well, was created back in the day to ensure that the Bay did not shrink because of infill. But now with the climate pressures, we are the ones charged with making sure that the Bay doesn't grow too much because of sea level rise. And that is a very real threat for all of us, and especially to our 9 Bay Area counties. And so BCDC adopted a first ever sea level rise adaptation plan. It's known as the RSAP, that includes projects that really need to be at the top of our list as a region to be able to protect our communities from sea level rise. And so working with ABAG and MTC, this is integrated into Plan Bay Area 2050 plus. The price tag, again, these are aspirational, is 90 billion. So when you look at it, it's broken down into near term and long term. So really do, if you're interested in this, I really encourage you to look into Plan Bay Area 2050 plus. Also check out the RSAP that BCDC put out earlier, late last year in December, with the 127 projects listed in there around the Bay Area. You can see what touches into your community. There are some other projects that are listed as placeholders because as flooding increases, there's going to need to be more work done. I can tell you that at one point, my house is going to be oceanfront property, bayfront property. Not something I'm looking forward to because I am more than 2 blocks from the Bay Area, but this list is encompassing what we might be facing. So to touch on really where we're at, ABAG and MTC are coming together to meet a moment of challenges when it comes to transportation, housing, and climate. And I'm excited for the partnership that we have and having a seat at the table at MTC to be able to work with my colleague and Chair Noack. And I'm going to leave it at that. And we've got more for you. And we're ready to, at the end of the next presentation, we're ready to answer questions. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it on to our Chief Deputy, Alix Bockelman.
Thank you, President Ramos, and thank you so much to League of Women Voters for inviting us to be here. And it's really great to share the stage with President Ramos and Chair Noack. So we're going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to just step back maybe a little and make sure you all know who is MTC, who's ABAG. ABAG is the older sibling in the family. They were formed in 1961 as a voluntary association of cities, towns, and counties to combine their efforts to meet the housing and land use challenges that were really created by the Bay Area's explosive growth in the post-World War II era. MTC was established about a decade later, specifically to plan the transportation network for the Bay Area and to lay the foundation for future public transit development. As the years went on, new legislation required long-range transportation plans to incorporate housing and land use and emission reduction goals. And as you saw on this slide at the beginning of today's event, both agencies have a 9-county footprint, so it's quite large. Next slide. This slide details how both MTC's and ABAG's responsibilities have grown and converged over time, and particularly since the passage of Senate Bill 375 in 2008 that required integrated transportation and land use plans and added state mandated climate targets. And just a fun fact, if any of you have visited us in our Bay Area Metro Center in San Francisco, our address is 375 Beale Street, and it wasn't originally. During the renovation, the front door was moved so that we could choose 375 as an address to pay a little tribute to SB 375. Next slide. While MTC and ABAG are separate governing boards and organizations, both boards have relied on a single consolidated MTC staff since 2017. And as mentioned, the staff is now 400 people strong. Next slide. The consolidated staff recently finalized a strategic framework to help guide our work. Our shared vision is a vibrant Bay Area that is connected, equitable, and sustainable. Our mission is advancing shared local and regional priorities for transportation, housing, and the environment. And our values are collaboration, equity, excellence, innovation, and integrity. Next slide. A few key points on this slide. One is that both ABAG and MTC work through committees, and that's where much of the heavy policy work is done. The other is that, and this was mentioned earlier, is that several MTC and ABAG committees meet jointly. which have really strengthened the regional coordination around both planning and policy issues. So on this slide, you see that the ABAG's Administrative Committee and MTC's Planning Committee meet jointly and oversee planning studies and programs, including Plan Bay Area. Also on this slide, the ABAG Housing Committee meets jointly with the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority's Oversight Committee and really tackles the joint agency housing portfolio. Last but certainly not least, the joint MTC and ABAG Legislation Committee oversees and develops both agencies' advocacy priorities and recommends positions on state and federal legislation. Next slide. So here's the same slide from the MTC perspective. And we probably should have noted this, but it's generally these meetings occur on the second Wednesday and second Friday of the month, unless otherwise noticed. And two committees that I'll mention in addition to what I just covered on the other slide that might be of interest to this audience. And that is the Programming and Allocations Committee meets and recommends how to spend state and federal funds, allocates funding for various projects and programs, and makes sure really that these investments are consistent with our regional priorities. Moving over to the Friday Committee, a somewhat I guess it was a retooled committee, the Regional Network Management Committee, really tries to look at coordination on not only the highways, transit, tackles our Clipper program, mapping wayfinding, fare integration, etc. Next slide. So I think you heard already from our leadership about the key priorities in 2025 that we have in front of us. So I'm going to say a few more words, and there'll be maybe a test at the end since we will have covered a few things twice. But anyways, really finalizing and improving Plan Bay Area 2050, advocating for a transportation revenue measure, and laying the groundwork for a regional housing measure. Next slide. And this slide really just shows the trajectory of our long-range plans. Again, in 2013, that was the first plan that really brought together transportation and land use. In 2040 is when we really confronted the region's housing affordability crisis that really led to expanded technical assistance for cities and counties, and also the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority. It seems apt that 2050 was the plan where we really started exploring the issue of an uncertain future, which has come to pass. And now under Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus, we're continuing that work, but also reflecting the greater headwinds that we have in 2025. Next slide. So Plan Bay Area 2050 includes 35 integrated strategies across 4 elements of transportation, housing, economy, and the environment. And I want to spotlight and draw connections between just a few of those areas. I'll start with the plan would build a 10,000-mile network of bike infrastructure and protect our shores from rising tides, invest in transit-oriented communities to spur downtown recovery, encourage more green jobs in all sectors and protect our green spaces, accelerate efforts to build hundreds of thousands of units of affordable housing served well by transit and community amenities, invest in electrification of our transportation systems and buildings, and focus growth in existing communities to preserve agricultural and recreational lands. We know it will be a heavy lift to achieve these goals, but the plan is our North Star, what we are working in tandem with public, private, and nonprofit partners to achieve over the next 25 years. Next slide. So shifting to the second topic, the transportation revenue measure, our Chair Noack touched on this earlier. MTC has prioritized initiatives to sustain and improve the Bay Area's public transportation system since the COVID pandemic really upended the business models for these systems, changed the travel patterns, and as we know, really changed in-person office work. Last summer, MTC convened the Transportation Revenue Select Committee to forge consensus on a revenue measure that would avoid major service cuts, advance transit transformation to attract new riders, and win support in Sacramento and ultimately at the ballot. And as Chair Noack mentioned, last month, The commission adopted principles to guide advocacy on Senate Bill 63. And also underway is an independent third-party financial review to strengthen people's trust in the numbers used to describe transit agency needs and local contributions to regional operators like BART and Caltrain. Next slide. So Chair Noack walked through the 6 principles that to guide the advocacy and potential sponsorship of SB 63. I'm going to touch on them a little more because they are really important to the work that we're doing. I think first and foremost, really our goal is to prevent major transit service cuts for regional operators. Transit is so foundational to so much of who we are as the Bay Area, so it's really important. A measure must advance transit transformation. Bay Area voters want a faster, more convenient, safer, and cleaner transit network, and a measure must help deliver that. Also, and I know this is really important to the League of Women Voters and to all voters, is that a measure must include accountability provisions. It should really make sure that we are being transparent about how the funds will be used and provide greater oversight of transit agency financial information. And importantly, also ensuring fairness. A regional measure must be considered fair by all participating counties, and taxpayers need assurances that they will benefit equitably from a measure. Also, we learned a lot through the Select Committee that we must take into account local transportation funding needs. You know, each county has existing sales tax measures, so really thinking about when those expire and how we make sure that those can continue to make important investments in the future is an important consideration. And last but certainly not least, it must be passable. And that includes keeping the rate to a level that is supported by key local elected officials within a county. It also necessitates simplicity to not lose voter trust. And given the poll results, it will need a path for a regional measure to be placed on the ballot via citizens' initiative. And lastly, we'll need broad political support. Next slide. So in January, we tested 3 revenue measure frameworks that came out of the Select Committee process, and polling indicates support for a 1/2-cent sales tax in Alameda, Contra Costa, San Francisco, and San Mateo counties. But the poll only matters, actually a poll doesn't matter. All that matters is sort of an election. So, you know, this is a really hard, victory is certainly not going to be a slam dunk in this area. So there's just a lot of work that's continuing on this. Next slide, and I'm going to shift to the last topic, which is the housing portfolio. In the housing implementation sphere, the big initiative that folks may have heard about is the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, which almost ran a $20 billion bond last year. BAFA is a critical and somewhat new authority that we have within the MTC-ABAG family, but it's far from the only regional initiative that we have in this space. In terms of planning, MTC has a long-standing priority development area grant program that has funded specific plans in cities in every county over the past decade. These local plans have reformed local zoning rules to allow for more than 200,000 new homes. Also, the Regional Housing Technical Assistance Program has supported all 109 jurisdictions with housing policy and planning work. The initial emphasis was to support local governments with the most recent housing element cycle to implement RHNA. And thanks to hard work by local jurisdictions, and I think help from this program, 92% of our local governments now have compliant housing elements. And in terms of implementation, while jumpstarting BAFA and leveraging several one-time sources, we're providing financing to create over 1,700 new affordable homes in transit-rich neighborhoods. We've preserved over 800 units and converted them to be permanently affordable, and have a pilot that is providing long-term rental subsidies to seniors in Napa to prevent them from falling into homelessness. So these are some accomplishments that help to demonstrate a proof of concept for why a regional approach on housing will add value and improve the lives of all Bay Area residents. Next slide. So what really makes BAFA unique is the ability to raise transformative levels of money across the entire Bay Area. This will require a regional revenue measure that is put before voters. We had a big disappointment last year with the removal of Regional Measure 4 from the ballot, and also the fact that Prop 5 was unsuccessful in November. But we remain committed to fulfilling the vision for BAFA and pursuing a regional housing revenue measure at the next viable opportunity. That most likely will be in 2028. And to help create the conditions for a successful measure then, there are critical steps we must take now. We want to deliver our current programs with excellence to really show the public the proof of concept and instill confidence in government. Also, having a strategic and inclusive planning process that engages both our boards and our stakeholders to articulate a vision that will sustain BAFA during the next 3 to 4 years until we can capitalize it at its scale. And we also want to give BAFA a new tool that is not currently in the toolbox, the authority for a citizens initiative. Based on recent polling and the loss of Proposition 5, the 50% plus one threshold offered by a citizens initiative seems to be the most likely path to victory. We're planning to run a bill in 2026 to make this an option for BAFA. And that concludes my presentation. So happy to turn it back to you, Roma, for Q&A.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. I'm sure it helped many of us understand how these two agencies now operate with a merged staff and independent governing boards. Just to let our participants know, thank you, Chair Noack and President Ramos, for your remarks. Forgive me for forgetting to introduce, for letting you make those comments, but you touched on some things that are really important to League Bay Area and to help some of our participants understand the work we do. We did follow the develop all the way back to, I believe it was Plan Bay Area 2040 was the first time I know of League Bay Area becoming very actively engaged, although some of the older members will remember even earlier work. We did comment on PBA 2050 on the environmental impact report. We've been very closely following PBA 2050 plus. And again, thank you for highlighting that because we view that as one of our most important roles is to monitor that progress and frankly, keep our eyes on you to see what you're doing and give our members an opportunity to comment. And then, of course, the BAFA regional bond measure was heartbreaking. But hey, I think everybody gets A++ for trying. And we look forward. We were very supportive. The League board did vote to support that measure very strongly. We thought it would have been a game changer. And we are, by the way, tracking. We've watched the committees as they developed over the last several months. If you got our last, hopefully you're getting monitor notes. If you got that, you got a little summary of what went on with the regional transportation measure. We got some questions around it. So I want to remind you all to enter questions into chat. And I thought we might kick off with President Ramos and President Noack. I'll let President Ramos go first. We had a question that really, several questions that relate directly to the fairness issue, probably related a little bit to how smaller cities are protected in terms of distribution of funds. Of course, I live in San Jose, which is the big giant there. So it's not something that we worry too much about locally. And also I'll let you answer both questions at the same time. There's a question that calls out the conflict that you have, you wear two hats. Chair Noack, you obviously are a mayor of a city. And President Ramos, you're a county supervisor, a former member of a small city council. So hopefully you could kind of comment on that. Do you ever feel conflicted, or how do you kind of sort that out? These are sort of personal questions, and we'll start with you, President Ramos.
Thank you so much, Roma. I really appreciate that. I think the question really starting about smaller jurisdictions. Keep in mind, I come from the smallest county, right? My county's total population is less than some cities that are members of both ABAG and MTC and represented at the table. And so I think one of the beautiful things is when you look at a council of governments, that is exactly what the intent is of a COG, is to make sure that there is that voice. So you look at our membership and you have representations from the cities, you have representations from the counties at ABAG. And so I think that's a really great point to make of this is a place where the smaller jurisdictions have a voice. Additionally, when you look at the distribution of funds and the work that we do, one of the things that we spend a lot of time actually doing and investing in through regional planning is our technical assistance. And that technical assistance, one of the ways in which it really does help those smaller jurisdictions that may not have that large depth of staff is to be able to help them with their regional housing needs allocation process, to be able to help them think through some of the priority, not just development areas, but also the priority conservation areas and the work that comes from that. And so our staff is accessible to those smaller jurisdictions and really in reaching out and making sure that those smaller jurisdictions know that work is there to collaborate on. And that's really, I think what I really want to switch to is collaboration is what makes regional governance work. When you look at regional governance, we have these labels of the MPOs and the COGs, and we have these different legislative bills. But really, those really mean nothing. What gives regional governance power is those of us that come to the table that are willing to put aside our respective hats for the greater good. Regional government is, in fact, the definition of greater good. And so, as much as I'm from Napa, and there are certain things that I am here making decisions at a table with my colleagues about things that, for the most part, don't affect me. For the most part, I say. When you look at Caltrain, when you look at BART, when you look at Muni, those don't touch Napa. But in wearing my regional hat and understanding that a commitment to regionalism means that we are all interconnected and that our county and city boundaries are simply politically made. The people, they don't know if someone's commuting from Vallejo to San Francisco via Marin. They don't know where it ends and starts. All they know is that there's traffic everywhere and that is affecting their quality of life. So to that end, to your question of conflicts, I would say sometimes you have to check yourself, right? You have to check yourself and ask yourself, is this for the greater good? And how can I be part of the solution? And to balance, right? That's what regional governance is about. It's about balance within the cities, the counties, and the region in and of itself. And so if you put that hat on, you say to yourself, yes, I'm gonna do this. Now, there are some instances, I'm gonna have one next week, where in my dual capacity as an MTC commissioner, and then you layer on some of the things that we do from ABAG and the Bay Trail, I'm going to be conflicted out on a BCDC item. So those things do happen. We have incredibly capable counsel that helps us through the legal conflicts, but from the yourself, the hats you wear, the moral, I would say regional governance is where we can aspire to be the best of ourselves and to look out for a common good. And that is what brings those that want to be at the regional table. That's what brings you to the table, is the common good.
Chair Noack?
Yeah, thank you. I'll try not to duplicate a lot of what Belia said, because so much of it would be true for me as well. But, we deal with these kinds of conflict all the time. I sit on the Contra Costa Transportation Authority as well. So that is a location that as well, city, county level, and then regional level, all three can come into conflict at some point. But I think what we try to do is say, okay, what is best overall for our region, for our county, for our city? And really that is a strong Bay Area. And, you know, Belia and I will work closely together because housing and transportation, there's not a line between those two. They're very interrelated. And having a strong housing, strong transit, strong economy will benefit everybody, regardless of whether BART goes up to Napa or Marin, or whether, you know, it goes down to Santa Clara. So it's super important. And we do have to put those hats on at times. But then we go back to the fairness aspect that Alix was talking about, one of the key principles. And that's very important as we're looking at these regional decisions and conflicts. We need to make sure there's also fairness in there. And that's super important. And that makes that conflict a lot easier to address when we can include that fairness principle as well. So I think that's super important. When it comes to smaller, Pleasant Hill is not quite as small as American Canyon is, but we're 34,000 people. You know, we feel like we get our fair share, I have to say. I think a lot of the planning tools and the assistance, as Belia mentioned, help a lot of small cities in addressing a lot of issues that they may not have staff for. I think there's a lot of regional perspective in looking at economic priority communities. And so whether you're a small town or a large town, we're looking at areas that need that funding better to again drive a stronger region. And so it's not looking just at a city line necessarily. It is communities that need that assistance as well. So when I think both ABAG and MTC, you know, as chair of MTC, and I represent a city of 34,000, but now chair the MTC, we as small cities get to play a big role in this. And Belia and I both come from small cities, but are able to play these regional roles really important. And we can reflect not only our cities, but our counties and the region. And I think that's super important. We have large cities represented, we have small, we all respect each other. We all have sort of equal voices sitting up there on the dais. And I think that makes for better policy and better programs overall. So getting fair share, I think everybody has that opportunity. But we go back to a lot of those principles we were talking about, fairness, building a stronger regional community has got to be our focus overall. And then we will all benefit from that in the long run.
Thank you so much. Alix, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think they covered it very well.
They did a great job, and thank you very much. I think it's particularly meaningful. I'm not going to repeat some of the questions, but obviously the issue of smaller cities getting their fair share was very important to some of the folks that took the time to submit a question in advance. And Alix, I'm going to ask you about this because it's kind of a technical question, but it is sort of a follow-up to the whole issue of fairness in areas. And we had a question submitted that said, we've been told MTC is focused on mitigating the problems caused by rising waters threatening Highway 37 from Mare Island to Sears Point and the low spot on Highway 12 and I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this. I think it's Shellville in the North Bay. Does MTC have a prioritized list of Bay Area roads in danger from rising waters? And is that list publicly accessible?
Thank you for that question. The Highway 37 corridor is one that, I think both MTC and ABAG have been really, very focused on, just given kind of the affordability issues for people that are taking that corridor and just the congestion, et cetera. And as you note, all of the challenges on sea level rise. I think what's, really exciting about the last plan we did, or at this plan that we're doing, is that in addition to kind of the transportation project list, for the first time, we do have a sea level rise resilience project list. And that really does name specific projects and costs. And that's, that's included in our strategy adapt to sea level rise. So, that's really a partnership. I think President Ramos talked a little bit about this. It's really a partnership between MTC and ABAG and BCDC. And it was really informed by projects and planning efforts, at the local level, where we do expect we could, have sea level rise affect our roadways. So there is a map form on I think all 4 websites, or I guess it's 3 websites, MTC, ABAG, and BCDC. And it's called the Sea Level Rise Framework Shoreline Project Inventory. So definitely accessible for people to go in and look at those individual projects.
Thank you. Chair Noack, did you want to add a comment?
Sorry, getting to, there's a lot of work done, and the cooperation amongst the agencies is really great. I also sit on the Bay Area Regional Collaborative, which is where all of these agencies come together and collaborate on projects. And so, sea level rise is obviously a factor that all of us are focused on, and not just transportation like Route 37, but also housing and other types of issues that are coming up around the entire Bay Area. There's so much land that is touched by water and can be impacted by sea level rise. It's and one of the important things, I think, is developing policies so that we do preventative stuff now to avoid having bigger issues down the road. And so 37 and 12 are issues that, we obviously have to address. They were done in the past, but we also have to look forward with our policies saying, let's make sure as we're developing housing and developing other areas that we also think carefully how they might be impacted by sea level. And so I think there's some proactivity to these policies as well.
President Ramos, do you want to add? Don't feel obliged.
No, I think I think it was all covered. So I'm just gonna say next question.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we actually have. Just remind everyone, you can submit questions. Folks aren't submitting questions, so please do. And thank you to those that submitted some in advance. And I'm going to, and again, we're not going to call on individuals. If you would please enter your question into chat webinar, please.
If I could just
Marianne, go ahead.
Make a comment. We're not using chat. We're using the Q&A box. And there are a ton of questions in there. One of which is about MTC and ABAG being interested in nature-based solutions and conservation for adapting to climate change. Or is their focus primarily on protecting and promoting development and transportation? So is the consideration being made by MTC and ABAG on nature-based solutions? If you could.
I would be happy to take that one. And actually, I did see that question, and I will go ahead and I will copy in actually a resolution where we approved a horizontal levee project in Palo Alto that was in fact a non-concreted type of levee and resiliency project. What we're looking at is really a balance. And I think this intersection is going to be highlighted in the work that happens in Highway 37 to have the integration of nature-based solutions, but also protection. I think the greatest way I can kind of sum it up is it's balance, where you look at what needs to be protected when you look at existing communities. But yes, absolutely, nature-based solutions are part of it. And with my BCDC hat on, I can tell you that the Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan did in fact encourage nature-based solutions. It didn't, in some areas, it's not necessarily appropriate to require them, but they are in fact encouraged and recognized within the Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan.
Okay. Thank you. There are also quite a few questions about
Marianne, I just
funding.
found the questions. Just found it. So let me go through and I'll try to pick out the ones that are closest to some of the ones we submitted in advance, because we're not going to have time to get through them all. Just to let you know, we are going to capture these questions and then go back to Alix and President Ramos and Chair Noack to try to get you some answers. And the next one, we have one again, and you touched on this, our RENA housing allocations in unincorporated areas of counties consistent with growth geography areas with high services and walkability. Alix, do you want to start, or you just unmuted, President Ramos. Do you want to take that one?
I'll start off by saying, I think, and Alix can give us more on the when we look at the challenges that we face, and I'm taking this one because I have a little more liberty in what I can say in addressing this as an elected. When the state of California through HCD doles out this big number to the region, as a representative of a very high fire-prone area that has water instability issues and flooding issues and is more rural in nature and doesn't have transit in all corners of our county, it feels like the state does not have a 3D map that looks at our topography and our challenges that we face. And so from ABAG's and MTC's perspective, this is actually an issue that we have identified in our legislative advocacy plan to, at the early start, be able to engage with HCD to recognize that some of these areas have challenges. And so from our planning perspective, yes, we're looking at this. This is something that we are integrating. In the process of RENA, that is begins as state dictated and then comes in locally, that's where the disconnect is happening. And so we did have a record number of appeals of housing allocation numbers at the local level from 28 of our jurisdictions at the last go around. And this is absolutely in regards to this very issue, where there were some jurisdictions that really felt like this number was not reflective of the drought we were facing at the time and the wildfire pressures, and also an additional one doled down by the state, which is the modification to the roads and street standards that really do affect the unincorporated areas of counties. And so there's the answer. Yes, and we have a lot of work to do in this area, and that has been identified in our legislative platform.
I'm just going to add to that a little bit, because Belia's got a different set of issues than sort of we had somewhat in Contra Costa County. And some of that was along the lines of affirmatively advancing fair housing, where there was a lot of focus on putting housing in what they call high resource areas. But high resource areas was sort of schools and parks and income, but not necessarily transit driven. And so there was a lot of focus on putting housing in places where people would not have easy access to transit or shops or things like that. And so that interconnection between transportation and housing is so important. And MTC's TOC policy, or transit-oriented community policy, falls more in line with that than the state did. And so I think, my understanding is the state is reviewing some of this as well. And so there needs to be a little better view. I mean, obviously the fire issue has become a bigger and bigger issue for housing, but it also relates to how can we build equity into our housing numbers and locations, and yet also tie it with good transit numbers, which are so important in shopping and things like that, in order to really make that affordable housing make sense. So there's some policies there that sometimes have a little bit of conflict, that I think we need to continue to focus on and look at the overall goals, whether it's climate change, emissions reductions, things like that, to really make sure that those policies that come down through RENA make sense and that are all aligned.
Thank you very much. Alix, do you want to add anything? Your
I think they
chair
did a
and
great
your
job,
president.
so I think they did a great job.
They
Thank
are
you.
doing a fantastic job. And we have several questions essentially that are related to funding. So I'm going to unwrap some of that. First of all, there's a question that says, how are you going to increase confidence by on behalf from the taxpayers? And again, they're probably referring to the BAFA bond measure and to the regional measure under discussion. How are you going to increase confidence from taxpayers? And then just as sort of a follow-up, with all the uncertainty from the federal level, what contingency planning is being done outside of proposing some sort of tax increase? This question mentions property tax increase. So Alix, maybe you want to talk just a little bit more about what the regional bond measure, there's not much detail in the actual bill, but what has currently been presented by Senator Wiener, and then maybe all three of you can talk about the confidence issue.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on the question. You're asking about the transportation revenue measure?
Yes. Let's just focus on that one for now.
In terms of what we're doing or how we're trying to increase confidence? I just want to make sure I'm clear on your question.
I'm asking you for both, but you can pick and choose how you want to.
Yeah, I think that, right now, SB 63 is just a spot bill. So, I think we're really, we've been very focused, as I noted, on just making sure that we understand what might be a viable path for investing more in transit. I think given the federal situation, we don't expect that we will be getting funds from the federal government to address our transit challenges. I mean, we received a significant amount of money from the federal government already and the state. So I think that, we really are looking at a local measure to really address this emergency that's before us. We continue to look at opportunities at the state level because of how critical this is, and because we need to be, having contingency plans and all plans on the table, because transit is so important to the region. Let's see, I think the other thing is, and I think it'll maybe transition us into the confidence conversation, is I think we are really working to, make sure that we're doing things so the voters can see it, both in transit and other things we're doing, that they can see that we are making improvements. Some of the things that came out of our Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery Task Force was really looking at improvements for our transit riders, including, having more transit priority. So you can kind of, if you're on the bus, you kind of speed along and hopefully wave at people who aren't on the bus and you're moving faster than them. Looking at fare products, like we have a Clipper Bay Pass, which is a wonderful pass that is available at certain educational colleges in the region, and that we'd like to expand, and also being available for employers. We're looking at rolling out a free and reduced fare so that when you transfer between systems, you don't have to pay as much. So we're looking to do that with the next generation of Clipper. So really demonstrating that we are making improvements that people can see. I think the transit operators are doing that. BART with their new fare gates, Caltrain with their newly electrified system. I think being able to show that we're really investing dollars wisely and people are seeing improvements, I think that that's really important.
Okay. Chair Noack, President Ramos, would you like to add anything, or we'll just go ahead and move to the
I'm just
to the
going to
next?
add just a,
Oh, go
a
right
little,
ahead.
yeah, if you don't mind.
No, of course not.
I think it's really important for the voting public to have confidence in not only MTC, but all the regional transit agencies, that the money they're receiving from the public in one form or the other, whether it's coming from the federal, state, or MTC, those are all taxpayer dollars. And so it's really important that they be spent wisely and efficiently and effectively. And I think it's an important thing that we are going to have to spend a good amount of time over the next year and a half before a measure educating the public, talking to the public, explaining how the money is used, how it's used effectively and efficiently, not only at MTC, but at the transit agencies. And I think it's something that's super important for everybody. And being a finance person, that's something sometimes everybody groans because I get into the weeds on the numbers, but it is really important. And I think that has got to be one of our goals over the next year. I think, first step was getting BART to say, we're going to give you money, but you've got to get all these fare gates in by the end of December 2025. And they're on target to do that. And those are the kinds of accountability. We're going to give you money, but we expect these things to happen. They're doing it. It's really working well. And those things are going to have to be continually focused on, that we're going to give you money. We expect these kind of results, and here those results have been achieved. And so that's something we're going to have to focus on over the next year and a half. How agencies are funded, how they're using the money effectively that they've got, what they're doing to also help this situation, because it can't just be out of taxpayers' money. So it's going to have to be, multi-agency, multi-people understanding and digging in to get confidence that this money would be used wisely and effectively.
Thank you. I don't know if President Ramos, if you want to add anything. I will say transparency and accountability are words we use a lot in League of Women Voters.
I would just add that I think when we look at this, as Chair Noack said, we are looking to making sure we build confidence. If we do not build confidence, we're not going to have successful measures. We're not going to be able to achieve our goals and make a dent into that Plan Bay Area 2050 plus. So that is at the ground level of our planning and what we're doing, whether it's at transportation now or at housing in 2028.
Thank you. Just another little quick commercial here. Please, those of you that are attending today, you'll be signed up for Monitor Notes, and watching the progress of Plan Bay Area 2050 is something we're going to be updating you on. You've heard mention of some chances to engage, so be sure and communicate with us, because we will probably be writing a comment letter at some point. And we had again, just kind of going back to transparency and accountability. We hear those terms with, we had a question here that critical concepts like transparency and accountability usually used in reference to transit operators, but what about MTC-ABAG themselves? How are they scrutinized? And Alix, I see you unmute, so I'm gonna kick this one to you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Obviously, I think we welcome oversight. We want to make sure that we are spending monies wisely. I will note, I was kind of chuckling because yesterday I attended the Regional Measure 3 Independent Oversight Committee, which was established when voters approved Regional Measure 3 to increase the bridge tolls and invest that in certain projects. So I think that is really important. We're glad to have that independent oversight group meeting. Obviously, we take the investment of these funds very seriously. We do independent audits. So again, I think we agree that that's very important for building trust and making sure that we are investing dollars wisely.
Thank you. And Alix, could you just comment why Santa Clara County is not part of the 4-county bond measure? Maybe comment on the letter you got from VTA. We've got some questions on that, both submitted in advance and in the chat. So if you could take a quick minute on that one.
I will, unless our Chair Noack wants to say anything on that.
Yes, please.
I am happy to go. Alix and I can probably both speak to this. It's been an interesting process through the select committee. San Jose at this point has indicated, their primary is Caltrain. Of all the agencies that are sort of facing this fiscal cliff, Caltrain. But they have many measures themselves that deal with all VTA, and I believe they have 3 sales tax measures. And so they really wanted to maintain their ability to ensure those three measures continue, and they're going to be renewing, I don't know, over a 10-year period of time, something like that. But they indicated a willingness to make the contribution necessary to contribute to Caltrain sort of their fair share. They just didn't want to be in the measure because that was the only piece of it that really touches San Jose and Santa Clara is that piece. And so they have indicated a willingness to contribute that portion that's needed, their fair share of their contribution to Caltrain to make that whole work. And so, you know, that has been, it's been a discussion. It's been a discussion whether Santa Clara wants to opt in, opt out on numerous occasions. But at this point, you know, that's sort of the direction it's heading. And I think the other four counties are fairly comfortable with that, with assurances from Santa Clara that they will contribute their fair share to the transit transformation piece and also to the Caltrain shortfall that's part of the fiscal cliff.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's my understanding as well from Santa Clara County folks, that we plan to do our fair share. So we'll be watching that with Lee. Lee will help you watch that one. Well, we're getting fairly close to time, but just quickly, I do want to mention, again, Plan Bay Area is such an important document to League of Women Voters Bay Area. We do have a bit of a question here that many folks don't know about Plan Bay Area 2050 or the regional shoreline plan, and what I guess it's a little bit of a plea to ask regional agencies to do more to get the word out. If you have any, we're certainly trying to do our part. If you have any thoughts on that, and whoever would like to go first, whoever unmutes first, we'll call on. Okay, guys. Thank you.
I'm happy to speak to it. You know, it is interesting when you're in an elected position and you talk to people about what their thoughts are on Plan Bay Area 2050, and they sort of look cross-eyed at you, and you start explaining. And that happens a lot, not only at this regional level on Plan Bay Area 2050, but you know, even local budgets and county initiatives and policies. And so, you know, I think a lot of it has to come back down to the electeds, the local electeds, communicating to their public about these important policy documents, talking about them in their council meetings, getting information out on their newsletters about Plan Bay Area 2050. You know, that's really where a lot of it's going to come from. People understanding how the projects within 2050 are the projects that are likely to get some funding, things like that. People need to understand that. But it really comes down, I think, to a local level, people really understanding, making sure their electorate understands how Plan Bay Area can affect them, impact them individually. And that's probably the best way for us to get all that information out. You know, I think MTC does a great job of trying to get it out on social media, holding public sessions, to get input from lots of people, but it's probably still not as wide as we'd like it. And I think, you know, that comes down to us as the local electeds to get that information even more broadly out.
So I did want to note, I believe my colleague, Matt Maloney, who I want to thank, our Deputy Executive Director for Metro Planning, I'm going to get it wrong, Metro Planning and Policy. I think he's putting in the chat the link to how to stay involved in Plan Bay Area. So you can also go to our websites, MTC or ABAG, and at the very bottom, I believe there's a place if you just want to stay connected more generally to the agency's work and get our newsletters. But I think he's putting in the chat how to get involved and stay involved in Plan Bay Area. And certainly we try to make sure we're getting the word out, and we try to meet people where they are. We can always do better. So appreciate you helping in that regard, and we'll continue to evolve how we get the word out.
Okay, and hopefully, by the way, I want to thank Matt Maloney for his assistance in this program, and let everybody know how grateful League of Women Voters Bay Area is to him. And Marianne, heads up, we're going to go just a little bit over. I think there were a number of questions about just general funding. Where does MTC-ABAG get its money? And now that the federal funding, the spigot's being turned off through January 2029, we're presuming, at least for that long, we'd like to understand a little bit more about what you're doing to address this. It's obviously a big area of concern for us. Who would like to take that? Alix?
Yeah, I mean, I can start and then turn it over to our president and chair. I guess just in terms of where does the revenues come for MTC and ABAG, it's different between the two agencies, and obviously the funding that comes for the programs we administer is a little bit different. I mean, ABAG is largely funded through member contributions. Certain of ABAG's programs rely on federal funds. For example, the Estuary Partnership Program relies a lot on monies from the Environmental Protection Agency, whereas the energy programs don't rely on federal funds for the most part. For MTC, MTC has a pretty diverse portfolio, federal, state, local funds. Most of the funding does come from the taxpayer, whether it be, gas tax, sales tax, tolls that support transportation planning programs, projects, and work that maintain assets. So, back to what are we doing, on the federal side. I mean, first of all, we are very much monitoring the events. We have a dedicated response team that's, meeting weekly to kind of make sure that we're connected on what is happening in DC. We're working with our federal and state partners to understand the impacts. Right now, what we've observed is that, the federal administration, obviously, well, we've all observed this, right, is trying to disrupt and change government. What that's meant for, transportation projects, or programs. Right now, we've seen some administrative processes slow down, pause, and then open back up again. So one example is, we have a document called the TIP where all our federal monies go and we need approvals. So we saw a little pause, but it was very short. You wouldn't even notice it unless you were really deep in the business. But that has opened up for now, so that's good. At this point, most federal funds are flowing, especially if they're formula dollars, and a lot of the money that comes to the Bay Area to support our transit, vehicle replacements, et cetera. It's over 700 million a year, actually, and that's formula dollars. And for now, that seems to be flowing normal course. So far, we've probably had the most issues with monies coming from the EPA. But even that money is flowing right now. We're starting to talk about reauthorization of the transportation bill, and so that's maybe a concern. And yet, of all issues, transportation is probably the most bipartisan. So, we're gonna watch and see what happens. So anyways, I guess I'll just note that and see if Chair Noack or President Ramos want to add anything.
No, I would just say on the transportation dollars, it seems to be, some slowdown. Here in Contra Costa, we received a mega grant for 166 million for some work on I-680, and we've definitely seen a little bit of a slowdown in getting that finalized. But I think we're very optimistic that, as Alix was saying, those dollars will flow, but it just may be a little bit of a slowdown. So that's the only thing I wanted to add.
Thank you. And we probably only have time for one more question. And because this is such a big part of League's work, and because we had a number of questions, could one of you just make a quick comment on how you ensure equity in all the work of MTC and ABAG? And who wants to take that one?
I'll go ahead and
I will start. Oh, go ahead, Belia.
I'll go ahead and start, and I'll just say the one highlight in ABAG, just to give you an example of where we include equity. When it came to our regional housing needs allocation, we actually chose a methodology that encompassed equity and looked at the injustices over the past to ensure that everyone dug a little bit deeper and would do better. So I'd give that just as an example of not only do we talk about it, we actually do the work.
Thank you very much. And Marianne, I'm going to turn it back to you. Apologies for running over on the time. but I'll turn, and again, thank you so very much to Chair Noack, President Ramos. You really made this a meaningful presentation. And Alix, you and your team at MTC and ABAG, the merged staff now, we appreciate this so much, and we will probably be calling on you in the future for more programs, especially on Plan Bay Area 2050. We're not going to let go of that one for sure. So Marianne, back to you.
Thank you, Roma. We are going to take, in a couple minutes, we're going to take a quick break because I'm sure that we might need one. But I want to thank again our panelists and our speakers. This has been a very educational event. And one of the things that we will be doing is scheduling some educational sessions for the public to learn more about Plan Bay Area 2050 plus, as well as how the money is being spent. I think we can provide a forum for the public as well as our members to learn what's going on with this whole issue. One of the other things is I'd like you all to think about what are the issues that you see, and I'm talking to the participants now, what are the issues that you say are important for us to address for our region? And what are the challenges that we face in solving those issues? And how can League Bay Area and our local leagues contribute to the solutions? Think about this, as we'll be talking more about this towards the end of our presentations. Right now, though, I think we probably want to take a break. But the session will continue to be open, but you can quickly run and do whatever you need to do. And we'll be back at noon sharp.
Good afternoon, and welcome back to the afternoon session here of our Bay Area League Day 2025. My name is Madeline Cronenberg, and it's my pleasure to introduce the panelists in our next panel. The panel's title is How Regional Government Decisions Impact Local Jurisdictions, and we'll be talking about three important projects that have been developed in the Bay Area. I am a longtime league member, both in my own league, West Contra Costa County, and on the Bay Area League Board, which I think is an incredibly important organization for all of us. I've served as past president and in other positions as an officer. But our speakers, I'll be introducing our three speakers right now. Our first speaker will be Rebecca Saltzman. She is an El Cerrito City Council member, one of my city council members, and a former BART board director. She's a dedicated local policy leader who has guided the Bay Area and California on many efforts to create a more resilient and livable community. She's currently a development director for Bike East Bay. She has been deputy director at Breast Cancer Action, interim executive director of the California League of Conservation Voters. She is now an elected El Cerrito City Council member, but previously she served as an elected member of the BART Board of Directors, served on the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority, Alameda County Transportation Commission, and the West Contra Costa Transportation Commission. And of particular interest to us at the League, in 2011, she received the League of Women Voters of Oakland's Making Democracy Work Award in recognition for her work and commitment to increasing citizen engagement in local government. Rebecca will be followed by Jason Baker, of the Caltrain Director of Government and Community Affairs, speaking about the Millbrae Station area planning resulting from electrification. Mr. Baker serves as Chief of Staff for the Executive Director on Legislative Strategies and Regulatory Developments. He develops and implements community outreach for planning, capital projects, and operations. He's also an elected official serving on the board of the Campbell Union High School District. He is past Senior Vice President of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, where he oversaw transportation, health, and housing policy programs, representing the group before state legislatures. He is a former mayor of the city of Campbell, located in Santa Clara County, and has a law degree from Santa Clara University School of Law. And our final presenter will be Ms. Banu San, San Jose Deputy Director for Housing Development and Financing. She'll be speaking about the Virginian Apartments, a preservation project in the Mayfair District. Ms. San is the Deputy Director leading the development of an affordable housing, advancement of housing policies, and government relations in the city of San Jose. With over 20 years of expertise in financial and commercial lending, she's led the key corporate growth initiatives driving business revenue and strategic operational outcomes across multinational and international organizations. She began her career providing microloans to companies in early stages of development, progressed into working with middle market and mid-corporate clients across a variety of industries, including manufacturing, import-export, technology, startups, legal, and healthcare. She joined the Housing Production Department in 2020 as Senior Development Officer, managing development of new construction. Her most recent role was Housing Planning and Policy Administrator before she became Deputy Director. So I am going to stop my share now so that Ms. Saltzman can begin hers.
Hello, everyone. Let me get the slides going. Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. I'm excited to speak to everyone involved in the league about this great project we have being planned for the El Cerrito Plaza BART transit-oriented development. I've been working on this for a long time because I served on the BART board for 12 years representing El Cerrito and many other cities, and just got elected in November to the city council. So just a project overview. This project includes 6 buildings with 743 residential units, with nearly half of those being affordable. And we'll get to this later, but this is really big in El Cerrito. It's a very big project for our quite small city. It's also going to include a small commercial space, probably for a cafe or something like that, and a huge public plaza, 22,000 square feet. So a lot of public open space within that particular area, which is kind of a semi-commercial, semi-residential district. It's going to be a big increase in public open space. And the goal is to have a new public library there. We have a great sweet library in El Cerrito, but the building is quite old. It's much smaller than what El Cerrito needs, and so we need a new library, and the city is working on financing that. So if you have not been to the El Cerrito Plaza station, the photo on the left here shows you what it looks like today. You can see the station there in the middle, and then it's surrounded by a sea of parking lots, which are more full than in this picture, but post-pandemic are certainly not full. Used to be pre-pandemic. And then you'll see it's in a residential neighborhood, but to the left is the El Cerrito Shopping Center, which is a very large shopping center. And then at the top of the image is San Pablo Avenue, which is a main thoroughfare connecting many cities and counties, and a lot of businesses there. And then the image on the right, you see what it's going to look like when this development is completed. A lot of new housing units, the parking that will still exist is hidden, and the big public open space. So it's going to be a really big shift for El Cerrito. So this fits into the policy goals both of BART and the city. So BART, when I was on the board in 2016, we adopted new transit-oriented development and station access policies. And in this policy, we established really strong goals for 20,000 new housing units on BART land by 2040, including at least 35% affordable housing units. And we wanted to increase the active mode share. You can see in this image on the left how we're prioritizing people getting to BART stations, with pedestrians and bicyclists being prioritized the most, then transit and shuttle, then drop off, then parking, really to try to get people there in other ways. And then in 2021, the BART board, while I was there, passed a policy to discount land up to 60% to support affordable housing development, knowing how challenging it is to put together all the financing for that. So I'm not going to go through each of these goals, but these are some of the goals that BART has in expanding transit-oriented development. We want to create better, more sustainable communities. We want to have a positive impact on the climate. We want to bring more ridership, which helps BART financially as well, especially now as BART really needs more riders. And we want to create more choices for how people get around. And of course, we want to assist with the deep affordability crisis we have in the Bay Area. It also draws from city plans and BART plans. So in 2014, the El Cerrito City Council passed the San Pablo Avenue specific plan, and actually a few years ago they had to go back and amend the plan to add more housing units because they had already entitled the units allowed in the plan. But the goal really there was to have this dense housing near transit, and to improve the streetscape along with it. And then the city also passed an active transportation plan in 2016. And then BART followed that up with the city's help with the Berkeley El Cerrito Corridor Access Plan, because BART has developments being planned at Ashby BART, North Berkeley BART, and El Cerrito Plaza. A lot of parking is going away, so it was acknowledged that we need a strategy to address this so people have other ways to get to BART. And this plan is quite detailed, but just some of the highlights. In El Cerrito, it involves parking management. So that's both parking on site at the BART station, but also the city is going to manage its street parking in a way it never has. None of the parking in El Cerrito is priced currently. And so now the parking, especially around the BART station, will be priced if you are there for a certain amount of time. And then there's a lot of improvements recommended in the plan for complete streets to make it easier and safer for people to bike and walk, for added bus service, and hopefully one day to add bike share, which we don't have any of in El Cerrito. Now, the housing opportunities are huge for a city of our size. In the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNAS, some people know it, El Cerrito needs to produce nearly 1,400 new housing units, including several hundred at the low income rate, and a couple hundred low income, and a couple hundred more moderate income. So this project provides more than half of the total housing units that El Cerrito needs to produce at 743 units. But it also produces about 2/3 of what the city needs to produce for very low income households. And it produces about half of what the city needs to produce for moderate income households. So this is really transformative for the city of El Cerrito. I'm not going to go through this whole table, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what it takes to do a project like this, which is a whole lot of partners and a whole lot of different sources of funding, both for the improvements for access and for transportation, and also to fund the affordable housing pieces of it. So nearly 100 million has been secured to date, and the city and BART and the developers are still seeking funding. But it's been really competitive, but even so, it still takes many years, and we're hoping to break ground later this year, and that's dependent on tax credits for the affordable housing component. So very complex, takes a lot of work, but we're very close at this point. So thank you so much. If you want to find out more about the project, you can go to this website, elcerrito.org/TOD. And I'm happy when the panel is done to take any questions.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And now, Mr. Baker, it's your turn.
Okay, let me just get this going. All right, hopefully that works.
Great.
I see some nods. Hi, everybody. I'm Jason Baker, Director of Government and Community Affairs for Caltrain. I want to thank you so much for having me here today. Whenever I run for office, I always appreciate the clarity that the league helps bring to issues and voters and races. Even when you ask me tough questions, I really appreciate the work you do. I want to start by talking a little bit about our electrification project that we just completed, because it was a big decision and a big investment by Caltrain and by voters and by the state and federal government that definitely will impact local government decision-making, including development areas like a couple I'll run through. I'm not going to focus just on Millbrae. I'm going to kind of take a little run up the corridor so people can kind of get a sense of some of the projects that we have touched, and I think electrification helped incentivize to some extent. So electrification launched on September 24. It includes more frequent service. We doubled weekend service. We had 15 to 20 minute service at 16 stations during the peak. And that's really because the new trains, they don't go any faster, but they would start and stop faster because they're electric. And so we can run them close together and really make service a game-changing new service. We've seen ridership increase 41% since electrification. And I think these numbers are actually a little bit on the weekends, a little bit low, because our weekend service is now above our pre-pandemic rate. Customer experience is great. We're getting great feedback. We've got Wi-Fi, changing tables in the bathrooms, outlets at every seat, and it's quieter inside and out. And we do have these youth passes that I always like to pitch, $2 all day, to try to get folks, young folks on the train. And sometimes they bring adults, and maybe they'll be lifetime riders. All right, last brag about Caltrain, because I am proud. I've worked there about a year and I love the railroad. We just did a poll related to that regional measure that we talked about earlier, and we found 82% of voters surveyed in our 3 counties had a favorable view of Caltrain, and 91% of our regular riders. So we're really proud of that. We think that it really shows the benefits of electrification, and I think that kind of favorability and the fact that folks like the train will have an impact on some of the developments we're going to talk about, and essentially density. We heard a little bit about Plan Area 2050. It's a little bit blurry slide on the left of where MTC and other folks have decided that they think density should go, and it kind of runs right up that Caltrain corridor on the left side of the bay. And the slide on the right really is a reminder that density and transportation are symbiotic. Density, trains and transportation, transit needs density, and density needs transit. And so again, that's our corridor running right up the bay. And you can see the darker colors, darker red is population density, darker blue is employment density. And that's not by accident. That's a result of a lot of decisions by rail agencies, and including Caltrain, by MTC and others, to make it so that we put density in the right place. Okay, real quick, Diridon Station area plan. It was a big Google plan and San Jose plan. We just got entitled a $1.1 million, a million square foot commercial space. It has ground floor active uses, about an acre of open space, and 336 indoor bike spaces. This is an example of us. It's right across from Diridon Station, from the historic station, and it's really an example of decisions by Caltrain and by that really affect local government. Redwood City, a little farther north. There had been plans in Redwood City for the Redwood City already put 2,500 apartments or more on the east side of our tracks. The west side had plans for substantial development at the 12-acre Sequoia Station site and other properties nearby, with plans for a total of over 2,000 housing units, a child care center, a 1.6 million square foot of office space. And that plan, now it's slowed down or changed with a new developer now, but that was plans like that, of that scale, to really change an area and connect it and bring jobs and housing, is a result of people having some faith in good quality transit. And even though the new developer has indicated that they want to go a little more slowly, they still have said they want to redo the site. And I think that electrification will help put the thumb on the scale of making it a little bigger, a little grander, because they know that they have good quality transit that people love to build around. We do have our own site there that we're working on, 2.8 acre property, 84 parking spaces, and we're working with the city and the developer to try to be creative about how to put transit-oriented development on there. We're offering like a little land exchange. So the pink is the Caltrain property, and the others is the development property. We're going to sort of swap that square on the left, or the rectangle on the left, so that we can have benefits for both parcels. Almost finally is our San Francisco rail yard site. This is substantial, a 20-acre site at our 4th and King station. The rail yard, the station is older. It needs to be replaced. We don't own the site, but Prologis developer owns a company owns the site. So but we do have an operating easement, so we can have train uses on the site. So we're working with Prologis and the city of San Francisco for a substantial development, including potentially a new train station, and perhaps the second largest tower in the city of San Francisco at this site. And it's really decisions, again, by MTC-ABAG, by Caltrain, and others, that make it so that this site could sustain that and really help put that in the right place. And then finally, my home city of Campbell. I was mayor of Campbell, and one of the last things I did was try to help get a couple developments approved in downtown Campbell. And if you don't know Campbell, you can't run for office in Campbell unless you put small town feel on your flyer. I did that, and so it's a tough place to get any development in. But we got approved some 4 and 5 story developments right in downtown. And part of the reason we could do that, this is hard. People get angry at you when you're on a council in a small city and you want to do a little development. They threaten recalls. But because we knew that this development was 75 feet from light rail, and light rail was running, and it runs right to Caltrain, and Caltrain was going to be electrified, that helped the elected officials have a little bit of backbone, a little bit of courage to take that vote. And now people can walk to downtown from this development, walk to light rail, hop on that to get to Caltrain, and it really has made a difference. I think that's sort of my personal story of how regional decisions to put, transit, to have transit be good, to support it, to put some those PDAs really can make a difference in local decision making. And that is all I know.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. We are now going to finish the panel with our last presenter, Ms. Sound.
Hi, everybody. I'm Banu Sand, Deputy Director of Housing Production in the City of San Jose. Thank you for that lovely background explanation. I'm just going to share my slides I put together a couple of things about housing production. Let me know if you're seeing that, actually. I'll make sure I'm sharing the right screen here. Multiple screens make it a little challenging. Okay. I hope everybody can see that. Let's go here. This is my team just putting a little animation on the slides. So I think you might hear our director, Eric Sullivan, talk a lot about the housing continuum. So I wanted to share this slide with you this is basically the city's focus on preventing, homelessness early on in the continuum, and really in helping individuals that are entering the experience of homelessness early in terms of points of intervention on the housing continuum to mitigate those who are unsheltered, and providing temporary options and wraparound services early on to build a bridge to eventually permanent housing here. And secondly, to ensure that, we're working on public and private funding partnerships to help fund the operations of the capital, as well as operating sides of in those temporary interventions, as it takes a pretty long time, maybe around 3 to 4 years, to build permanent supportive housing. So although we want to eventually have people move into permanent supportive housing, it takes quite a number of years to put the funding together, as well as the construction itself. So it takes 2 to 3 years, finding the land, finding different sources of funding and subsidies to make that happen. Because of that time frame, in the meantime, we have to find temporary solutions here to help individuals. So I wanted to just share that a little bit with you. These are our 6-cycle RHNA goals. Basically, we have to continue to support the production of housing, permanent supportive housing, towards producing around 34,000 homes for very low income and moderate income individuals and families. More recently, the city has turned to incentive-laden policies to help market rate projects pencil out, because last year San Jose experienced almost 0 to very slow growth in market rate development. And so this new incentive program that we adopted is going to help spur developers towards, pushing forward more shovel-ready market rate projects that did not pencil out before. And these programs are basically going to be providing some incentives in terms of reduction, like 50% reduction in construction taxes and other in lieu fees and so on, to help help these projects pencil out so that they can move forward with projects that are ready to go, but just didn't hit the right financial feasibility. So we are recently seeing 2 to 3 large market rate projects that are almost going to be ready to move forward because of the benefits that they're going to be getting from this program. And this program focuses around these projects that were permitted and were in high growth areas and just weren't able to move forward. And the incentives are making that difference for them to be able to start building. So we hope to see a little bit more movement in the market rate developments this year as well. This is just a little excerpt on what affordable housing production has been looking like for the past 4 or 5 years. And in our department since 2020, there have been 10 affordable housing developments that we have completed construction on, meaning we have funded along with our other partners, public and private partners. And we produced since that year around 877 affordable units with a total city funding of $115 million. Currently in the pipeline, there are 9 projects, affordable housing projects going through construction, which will be delivering another 844 units with around 121 million in city subsidy investments. As of March 25, 3 affordable developments with total of 395 units and approximately around 63 million have current funding commitments and are expected to start construction within this year. I'll go through 2 permanent supportive housing examples of projects that we funded recently. This is the Dry Creek Crossing development. It's on 2388 South Bascom Avenue. And it was developed by a partnership between 2 affordable housing developers, CRP Affordable and Housing and Community Development LLC and Pacific Southwest. 63 apartments serving extremely low income, very low income and moderate income individuals and families, with 15% of units being accessible with ADA requirements. And 69% of these units are 2 to 3 bedroom apartments, therefore serving families. It is located in an affordable housing expansion area per our siting policy and in the South Bascom Urban Village Plan. Then in terms of the funding for Dry Creek Crossing, this is one of those, I mean, in order to fund affordable housing, you have to have multiple funding sources, private, from tax credits to private equity investment, and then with the help of subsidy funders like the City of San Jose, County of San Mateo, HCD. There are many programs that developers are going after to help bring the financial stack together to build these homes. So this is just an example of what the funding would look like. You can see that they're working with private banks on the construction side and then permanent, as well as the City of San Jose and private equity dollars that are attracted through tax credits program. The next example is the Housing Authority's development. It's a Houghton Senior Apartments, and that was on 118 North 15th Street, a 1.1 acre site. And it was a 4-story building with 3 levels of residential units. And 47 of the units were supported by project-based vouchers, which means they received rental subsidy assistance. And so 21 of those units were permanent supportive housing, and 26 are going to be serving extremely low-income households. So a total of 103 units, and 51 of that will be towards extremely low-income individuals and 50 for very low-income senior households. And the funding is quite similar. We can see, except that in this one, there was also a little spelling mistake there, contribution funding from the County of Santa Clara, as well as the City of San Jose. And again, even funding directly from the Housing Authority themselves within this, for this project. Besides the senior loans that are out there from banks and the tax credit and equity investments. So bringing the financing together to build permanent housing is pretty complex compared to my, much more simpler lending private sector days. I mean, you have to go to multiple funding sources to put your stack together. And some of the, state funders have rounds of application only once a year, at most twice a year. So developers sometimes have 1 or 2 shots to really get their funding, and that makes it very challenging. Trying to bring all of that together, it was on average still taking 2 to 3 years. So one of the things that the city has been working on lately is much more stronger collaboration and partnership with the county, some other local state agencies, to sync up our, timing of our NOFAs and funding so that the developers are not waiting months to apply for rounds. And we're putting our efforts together, prioritizing the shovel-ready projects to move forward. So we're shortening that time that it's taking for developers to go after these fundings as they put their financing together. And finally, this is an example of the city obviously still continues to support the preservation of affordable housing within our city. This is a very unique example of a recent acquisition that the city supported for a naturally occurring affordable housing property. And as a part of the housing element, a part of the housing element was about having unsubsidized small multifamily rental properties occupied by low-income individuals and families, and preserving family stability in our neighborhoods. And Virginian Apartments is an example of the South Bay Community Land Trust coming in and looking for assistance to acquire a naturally occurring affordable housing property. Naturally occurring meaning that the rents are already pretty low, and it has been maintained that way for quite some time. And in order for us to preserve that and continue to place those, lower rents for these individuals and protect this property, we assisted the land trust in buying as well as funding rehabilitation of this property. So it was an 18 unit property, and they were able to obtain funding through BAFA for the acquisition, and with the support of the city's funding as well, around $5 million for the rehab, as well as some donations, some contribution from a local foundation and Destination Home. The South Bay Community Land Trust was able to acquire this property and is in the process of finalizing the financing to start the rehabilitation and preservation of these units. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. And if there are any questions, I'm open to taking those as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And it turns out there is only one question for this panel. And the lucky person who gets to answer it is Mr. Baker, because it is to you, Mr. Baker. And I'll just read it because it's in the Q&A, but I'll read it. And this is from a constituent who says, I missed the stated reason for not including Millbrae TOD by Mr. Baker. As a city resident, I'm aware of the city's TOD plans being tossed out and replaced by a plan producing no modernization of the BART interface with Caltrain, eliminating a housing project that included public space, commercial space, and replacing with a multiple acre surface parking lot. I would like Mr. Baker to respond to this.
All right, thank you. I'll do my best, and I think it's two answers, maybe more than that, but I'll give a couple answers. One of which is I am honestly not an expert on that particular development. We have an entire real estate department, and today I have the pleasure of subbing for Michelle Bouchard, our executive director, who is supposed to be on here, so you wouldn't have another man on the panel on Women's Day. But I will take that moment to mention that now. Not only is Caltrain led by a woman, but also all of our member agencies are, and that just happened, and so we're very proud of that. The other piece is there's a lot going on at Millbrae, and that would be my whole presentation and more. And really, I wanted to have a little run up the corridor and show corridor wide the changes that having a good, clean, successful railroad can have. So that's I think the other piece of the puzzle.
Thank you. And thank all of you for your participation today. We really appreciated your being part of our International Women's Day event, and also sharing the importance of housing. There is no end to the importance of housing in the Bay Area right now, and the League is ever interested in supporting your work in it. So we will now move on to our final presenter, who is, let me do my share. Kathleen Shaw.
And I would like to introduce Kathleen. She is our restudy chair, and she's also a past president of League of Women Voters of the Bay Area. Kathleen has served many years on the board of directors of the Oakland League, headed its communication committee, served on the education committee, published the newsletter, and participated in various voter service activities. However, she left the board in Oakland board in 2021 to lead the League Bay Area, which supports the current 20 local leagues in the Bay Area. And the Warren Publishing Group recently honored Kathleen for her vision, commitment, and leadership in her service on the League Bay Area. I am proud to introduce Kathleen Cha.
And welcome to everyone who's still here and you haven't probably had your lunch yet. So I will come to this. My part is, maybe I should really reiterate what Rianne and Roma said at the very beginning, which is what is the role of the league? We are an ILO, interleague organization, like we say, an action committee, but we're dedicated to the concept of regional solutions. We were formed in 1961 to, at that time we were managing regional problems, evaluating regional planning, decision-making, implementation, dealing with growth management, resolving problems beyond local political boundaries. And that's been a focus. But today's presentation, it represents our total focus on integrated regional decision-making regarding Bay Area sustainability, resilience, equity, housing, and transportation. Now, how did we get here for that? We, in 2022 to 2024, we brought to our leagues and said we needed to do a regional government and planning study update. Why that becomes, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Give you a very brief look at past studies that have led to the current position that was made in 2000 that we wanted to update and bring to a new area. And what we wanted to do was, and why we wanted to do that was, over the years, the 50 years we have been looking at regional problems, we found that this update study was necessary because it's in light of changes in scope and structure of regional agencies. New regional planning collaborations were being formed that moved beyond our initial approach over the years of creating a mega or multi-purpose regional agency with elected representatives. And what we were being driven for in this study is the need to more specifically focus on integrated regional decision-making priorities and integrated planning regarding Bay Area's sustainability, resilience, equity, housing, transportation, and the impact on local government and communities. So you can move the slide ahead. I'm going to drive her crazy. Keep going. You can keep doing this. Keep going. And we have been looking at more than 50 years. We've been looking at various studies. You can move this ahead. And I'll get into more detail, but rather than keep going, you can move the slide ahead. Let's look at this. In 1960, the league's first Bay Area leagues was we established on regional governance and supported the formation then of the Association of Bay Area Governments as a step in the right direction. In the 1960s, one criteria study we did, we evaluated area-wide agencies and decided that it was not sufficient for a regional agency to have power only to plan, but also the power to implement its plan. After a series of more studies, we reached the area of we wanted to support the development of a regional multi-function government. In between all those studies, we were looking at not only metropolitan government proposal study, area-wide transportation facilities, land use on focus on parks, open space. We looked and deeply studied on the development and implementation of the Bay Area Regional Plan, and in fact did an evaluation in 1970 of the first regional plan, which had been done by ABAG, their regional plan of 1970 to 1990, which has evolved into and you've heard a lot about the new Plan Bay Area, not new, but the ones that have been going on since then. We also looked at mechanisms to comprehensive regional plan. And we studied CEQA guidelines. We looked at air quality, transportation, regional financing, resilience. Is there someone? Oh, sorry. We looked, but running through all of these studies was the issue of effective regional governance, with the proliferation of single-purpose agencies, which there were many, was hampering this effectiveness. And in fact, in 1990s, we talked about reinventing regional governance. But what was behind all this? There was a study in 1998 that came to our 2000 study, which said every poll, study conference, news coverage about the Bay Area's problems ends with a lament about the fragmentation of land use decision-making and economic and social inequities and disconnects among transportation and environmental protections, economic development, social services, and land use planning at both local and regional levels. All of that flowed from that fragmentation, which became the reason why we had that major position that said we must support legislative action to establish a multi-purpose regional planning agency for the 9 Bay Area counties of directly elected representatives from newly established districts. That was 2000. Things changed. We realized we're 2022, 2024, when we were saying an update is needed, is that after things began to change and began to address those issues, multiple legislative issues throughout that time did not pass. But what you see has been happening, and you saw it already, and this is why this program has been so interesting and important. Look at what ABAG, MTC-ABAG, and their consolidation staff and their joint planning efforts in integrating the plan, transportation, land use, and that whole Plan Bay Area 2040, 2050, and on, all began to address that so-called fragmentation issue. And even to there was legislation that created the Bay Area Regional Collaborative, which joined the 4 regional agencies together so that they could, in a sense, they could begin to address the issues together and begin to emblematically integrated planning. That shoreline adaptation plan you heard about, sea level rise, came out of that particular under the leadership of BCDC, your Bay Conservation Development Commission. So what I'm trying to say is that what we began to look at, we wanted to propose the need to update our 2000 position. We even in our 2024 convention said, when we were talking about our program priorities, of course, which were housing and homelessness, what we began to say is, and this is what the study has been focusing on, support the implementation of sustainable, integrated regional government policies and practices that recognize the interdependence of environmental, social, health, and economic impacts, and provide for long-term protection of natural and social resources. And then advocate how agencies address these interrelated regional issues: housing, transportation, conservation and natural agricultural landscapes, climate change, sea level rise, social and health community equity in a truly integrated and holistic fashion. And that's what we've been doing with this study. If you want, you can move the slide ahead. And I have put in this, and you can move it again, and you can have access to all this. But this gives you an idea of our positions right now and what we're doing and how we're working and what we're studying. And of course, that very last position there, regional government planning, and what we are updating. You can go ahead and move it forward. I think to summarize what all this, and it has been incredibly revealing to show all of these joint planning, these integrated regional planning efforts that ABAG, MTC-ABAG have been doing, and then with BCDC and with the Bay Area Air Quality Management all together. and you can see that integrated planning in the Plan Bay Area 2050, and that's what we've been looking at. But I wanted to share, I think that there's a priority that the MTC-ABAG Joint Advocacy Program 2025 just recently, what a statement they made captures the theme of our regional study and gives you my last update so far, that we were looking to engage in a holistic review of California's regional transportation and land use planning framework with the goal of improving how state and regional agencies collaborate to make progress toward the suite of state and regional climate, housing, and transportation related objectives, including ensuring state agencies balancing this suite of goals and distributing certain state funds. And of course, this is a very important thing. And there, in this particular statement, they're talking about state, although we look at monitoring because the state legislation affects our region. But we are looking, of course, at more regional particular kind of framework. I think that what we're talking about is that we are looking in our study, making a position of promoting the implementation of sustainable integrated regional policies and practices, and we've been looking at regional planning and and how it's related to housing, unsheltered, sustainability, economic justice, and equity. And we've been using an equity lens too in exploring regional priorities and decision-making that we believe will benefit all members of our diverse population, especially those who are marginalized or underserved. So you can see the scope of what we've been looking at. Go ahead and move forward, Catherine. So this is what we've been doing. This is where we're at. What are our next steps? And that involves all of you. And that is, right now, we're in the process of putting together what we call our Regional Consensus Building Study Kit that will be distributed to all 20 leagues under board review at our March board meeting. But we're going to distribute these in April, and what they're going to be filled with is proposed positions. And although I've mentioned action policies, which tend to come back to the board, but give you a sense of the positions and the regional planning issues that we want to put in our planning. And this kit will be including not only a history of the regional planning, but also a grid that's with describing all of the regional agencies, functions, joint powers authorities, community-based organizations, whatever, that are involved in our regional decision-making, as well as then we will have a series of briefings that will help inform so that when we put these positions before each of our leagues, that they can look at them and say, yes, you know, what have you missed? And they can also make sure that their priorities from the local are being reflected, that they can make sure that we are advocating for things that serve us all. And then we will bring, after we get all of that input back, we will do whatever edits or whatever reform that needs to be done. And on May 31st, we will have what we call our League of Women Voters Bay Area Council meeting. And that's where the final approval of the recommended positions and an introduction of some action policies that we are recommending by delegates representing the 20 leagues. That's our timeline for now. And why don't you move to the next time? And I've given you what I call the very short. They were laughing at me. My presentation could have been a whole lot longer, but I figured by the end of the day, you've already heard you've already heard very insightful information about integrated regional planning, which is what our focus of the study has been about, and which we are, you know, now language is power. So we're now not just saying we support it, we're making sure it's written out as part of our positions. Want to give real kudos. We've been meeting for a couple of years via Zoom and together. We have a really great crew of people. Linda Craig won who has been involved in regional planning and regional decision-making since the early days, and has a real, talk about a legacy of information and insight. Our co-presidents and members, Madeline Cronenberg, with real insight into a variety of policies and what have you. Louise Rothman-Reamer, they're incredible, and then Yolanda Schoenbrunn. But you'll notice out of these, and why I'm drawing attention to them, is each of them are representing different areas. We also not only wanted expertise in looking at regional planning policies, but also geographic understanding, the local needs, and understanding are they being translated into some of these regional priorities and policies. Jean Perry, Phyllis White, out of Oakland. Jean Perry, really, really interested in terms of insights not only into health, but also other regional housing and livable decision making. Kevin Ma was an incredible insight in his observation of regional agencies and insights about regional decision making, and serving on other studies in terms of housing. We've had great contributions from Sherry Thomas, Julie Pollitt, who's had her, and we had an elected official, Janet Abelson, out of Contra Costa, who was great insight in the early years, early stages of our study, but who then passed away. But I wanted to give recognition to her contribution. That brings me to the end, and I guess the end is we want your insight, and we you'll be seeing these study kits going out that will be more than comprehensive, and we will be available to be able to talk with you in each one of the leagues to talk about these issues and really get some good briefings in person, via Zoom, so that you can, so that we can elicit what is really needed or what's missing from what we're proposing. I will turn it over. Do you have any questions? Would love to be able to see if there's any insights or things that you see are needed. How did we do on timing?
Are there any questions for Kathleen?
I was right on time, almost.
Okay, if there are, I want to thank Kathleen very much for her presentation and for updating us on the status of the study update. And as she has invited us to send her any questions and participate in the council meeting in the end of May, we hope that you will all be able to send her questions so that she can respond. Okay. I think we are now, there are no more questions. I think we are now coming to the final slide. Leslie Stewart, you have a question.
Yes,
Oh,
I put a question in the question box.
Question, are you expecting us to just rubber stamp?
No, I actually, there are two questions, part one and part two, because I was trying to get it in time so you would see there was a question, which apparently nobody did. And the full question is, how do you expect us to provide in-depth information to our members on all of this complicated information, which wasn't in my question, so that they can discuss and come to consensus in this short time frame? Or are you expecting us to just rubber stamp your proposed position? We are currently doing a federal judiciary study for the LWV US on an extremely compressed time frame, but we do have a study committee in our local league, and we are discussing, and we will have 2 consensus meetings, which we managed to schedule in March. Now we are hearing that we have this study on an even faster time schedule between now and May.
Kathleen?
Oh, no, your question is very good. And it's one of the reasons why we posted this League Day presentation, because it goes to what we're proposing in the study. But what we're making sure is that when we send this study kit to you, the information that you need is there so that you can, it'll give you that background, all that you need. And then,
Yes, but it's there for whom?
pardon me?
It's there for whom? All of our members need to know what's in there before they have a consensus meeting. And you're not giving us much time to do our homework.
Well, I'll work with you. We'll make sure that you've got it in that time frame, because
For one thing, we did not pitch League Day as this is your preparation for a consensus meeting.
no,
And it should have been, because this is the background you want people to have.
I agree. Okay. We'll keep accelerating this.
We can certainly make the recording available, and I guess that's probably the best we can do, and we can start getting the information out now. But, you know, I complained about this last year and the year before, I think, on this extremely aggressive timeline where the committee did a lot of work, and then we were supposed to hurry up and absorb it all in a very short time frame. And it seems like we're still in the same place.
Okay. Appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Well, I think reviewing the study kit will be able to help you through that analysis. Okay, are there any other questions? I would just like to thank all of you and wish you all a happy International Women's Day. And reiterate the questions that I had asked at the after the senator's presentation. What do you see as major issues for our region? And what challenges do we face in solving them? And what can League Bay Area and our local leagues contribute to those solutions? And we will be presenting those questions and also hopefully getting your responses over the next few months. And Jean has a question. I'm sorry, I cannot see the Q&A.
I can see it. Would you like me to read it?
If you could, please.
It says, I want to acknowledge the forward approach to the restudy. LWV positions are revised to reflect application to changing circumstance.
Okay, Kathleen, did you want to respond to that?
Oh, I just wanted to say, yes, because here we as the Bay Area League have always been about a dysfunctional multi-agency approach. Now, what we have is really looking at a different kind of approach, an integrated joint planning, which we're seeing with MTC-ABAG, and we're seeing with the Bay Area Regional Collaborative and other agencies. And so this is what this is not, this approach really reflects new regional joint planning and holistic integrated planning that is going to further our Bay Area, and which agencies are stepping up to do. It's just now putting it down.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to our participants for hanging in there with us. Roma might have some comments also.
Just again, thank everybody so much for participating, and thanks to those that hung in there all the way to the very end. And we would like your feedback about whether you're interested in trying to do in-person League Day, educational days, whether you prefer Zoom, you're interested in a hybrid, topics, where Marianne and I are reaching out to local leagues, going to meetings, asking what their priorities are, how we can add value. So if we haven't met with your local league yet, again, email us lwvbayarea@gmail.com, or you can find us by just entering LWV Bay Area in a web search. And thank you so much for attending, and thanks to my co-president there, Marianne.
Everybody have a great International Women's Day and a great weekend. Thanks again.
Bye. Bye-bye, everybody.